This week, we are excited to introduce Emil Vincentz, co-founder of Actor, to the podcast. Actor is a nonprofit based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and is Beacon's technology partner. These delightful Danes are dedicated towards developing a secure and decentralized organizing tool to provide a trusted digital space for organizations and networks to coordinate collective action and create systemic change. Join Jared and Emil this episode as they discuss building the Beacon platform with Actor and the many solutions that this partnership can bring to the real world. Now sit back and enjoy It's Time We Talked, Episode 6, Taking Action with Actor.
Welcome back, everybody. This is It's Time We Talked. I'm your host, Jared, founder of Beacon. This is the official podcast of the Beacon Network. And today we are very excited to be welcoming Emil, co-founder of Actor, a nonprofit in Denmark that has been developing an excellent social networking platform that we are excited to be introducing really soon. So thank you, Emil, for being here. Good afternoon to you. It's morning here. Nice to have you across the ocean on the screen.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jared. And maybe say I have been developing, still very much in development as well. So just closing down some of the other tabs to be present for the next hour or so. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, for sure. We're glad to have you. I know you've got a lot going on right now. You recently launched the testing of the new platform, and it sounds like it's going really well. We've been testing it and are really happy with it. So
amazing. Yeah, it's definitely. Maybe we can dive a little bit into that also. Where we are at the moment, for sure.
Yeah, sure. But maybe for starters, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and about Actor?
Yeah, we'll do. So, and thank you for having us here and sharing a bit about our work. So, currently based in Denmark, a small country in the north, for those who don't know. And to kind of like make a long story less long about sort of the why actors here in my role, but still relevant, I guess, for the user context here, the listeners. I've been the last 10-12 years working with different projects that has and have a societal environmental focus, and primarily kind of over the years been more and more activistic driven. And I think come into the word of what is activism, I think could also be interesting, a whole episode for itself, because I think there's a lot of connotation to what is activism, and is this only like rebel throwing stones, or is it like what is it really? But nevertheless, that's kind of the projects I've been involved in. And I think, like, why is that essentially? Why is that? Why has that been important to me? I think I live in a place where I get food, I have shelter, I have all my basic covered. So I've been fortunate enough to think about, okay, what do I want to give? What do I want to offer to the world? And that has been very simple in some way, wanting to leave the world a better place than when I was born, or at least attempt to do it. And for me, so has been being involved in these various projects that has both been part of a youth movement in Denmark, been fortunate enough to be in Peru and work with Fab Labs, like creating a floating Fab Lab. And people don't know about Fab Labs, really a cool concept of kind of like this maker movement. So creating also alternative income for people living in the Amazon forest, so they didn't have to chop down trees to get income. So anyways, being involved in all these projects, and over the years, been very fortunate, but also kind of seeing and experiencing this fragmentation to many levels that there is among a lot of these initiatives that is working to solve some of the same challenges related to the biodiversity crisis, climate crisis, societal issues. And kind of over the years, that frustration grew stronger and stronger, and kind of like, at some point for me came to a point where, okay, if I want to contribute to essentially making the world a better place, is that through starting a new initiative. And at that point, I was working with an initiative that was around collecting plastic in the rivers and the ocean. And for a while, I kind of paused and say, okay, is that really what I should be doing? And in that process, I stopped and was kind of like trying to then talk to some of the people I was surrounded by and understanding what do you experience as some of the barriers that is that is present within social movements and a lot in civil society. And that kind of started not a plan, but started a kind of research process nevertheless for 1.5 year. And this is roughly beginning of 2019, January. And we started to map sort of like what is not only the barriers, but also the levers that are helping, but also preventing civil society organization from really creating impactful change. Um, and yeah, spoiler alert, of course, that nevertheless led to building Actor. And I think one of the things there was, never really trying to look at it from a tech perspective. It wasn't that like, hey, let's build a new app that can do X and Y Z. It was really, okay, what are the barriers? And there we could really see distinction between, okay, there's a lot of barriers relating to values and norms and cultural differences, but really starting to see more and more like how the tech landscape and technical tools, where it kind of is both supporting, but also a part of preventing and creating silos and fragmentation. And I think maybe that's also something we'll get into today. Is like in general, what is the some of the technology and the role that technology is playing for supporting civil society? And yeah, just to round that up, really seeing how none of the tools really out there are built directly for supporting civil society organization, but either is built for gamers, then is then adapted. Talking about Discord, Slack is built for businesses, that is also adapted. And so what happened to large movement that all use WhatsApp with 3,000 people, and stuff like that. So that's essentially why we, with a very high ambition level, say we believe we can do it better. And so that's why we started Actor.
Yeah, beautiful. I've said this to you before, but it was such a thrill for me and for us to discover you guys, and be connected through Sam, and just realize like, wow, you have understood the problem in the same way. You're focused on solving it, and exactly you're providing the solution we've been looking for. So it's really just it's incredible to load off our shoulders, and it's also like very much needed in the world right now. Because as you said, we're using all these bad tools to do something that's so important, which is come together in what you called civic society or community, like having to use WhatsApp, which is owned by Meta, which is Facebook, and which will sell your data or give it up at like a moment's notice, or having to use social media, which is designed to keep people distracted and manipulated, is just a terrible thing. And then there, like you said, there's Slack and there's Discord, but those channels just weren't made for us, and they don't cater for us. They're ultimately for making money. So to have a platform that's not trying to make money but just trying to be useful is like everything, and it doesn't exist, and it's like so core to what the internet is about and what could be accomplished. So I think you found the right initiative to focus on. So
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
I definitely hope so, because I think, and I sincerely believe that, of course, otherwise we wouldn't be working. But also thank you because even though like we've been working for 4 years now, it's still, it's such a big. It means a lot to, both from you, but also coming from others, because I think personally for me, it has been my biggest fear that we will be a part of the problem, that we actually will contribute to the problem by creating, more tools. So what you're essentially also saying, about the questions, I think, like I think that's also something over time. The more we have found out, the more we know what we don't know. And I think to be humble in that space and keep asking questions instead of only producing, I think it's something at least we're trying to keep focusing on. That's also why co-creation is a big part of what we're doing. Meaning, how do we make sure that we involve the development and everything around real problems, not something we think is a problem, and sort of only develop an hypothesis. So hopefully we have been asking some of the right questions, and also to you in some of the sessions. So yeah, really great to have you part of the project.
Well, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I thought our meeting yesterday with your developers and team was fabulous, and you guys are just right on the money with what's coming down the pipe next. And it just feels really good to be included in the process. I feel like you take seriously the community feedback, and you're really building this in conjunction with the people you're trying to serve, which says a lot. So I am optimistic about where things will go.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, really excited. And I think maybe that could also be a good segue to, I think, maybe to talk a little bit about yeah, I think again, what is some of the underlying projects, or like, sorry, not projects, problems? Now you mentioned also Meta, and other, and I think these relate to some kind of really big, I want you to say trends, but like movement signals, that is happening globally. That comes both from technology in general. And now we have AI, which is a really big part, but also general social media. Um, and I think for us in that research process, coming back to that, um, which again can be split into many different areas of what our findings were, but basically to kind of also for the listeners to know, okay, what is some of the things that we, I guess, honed in on and believe is some of the core needs. It's for one, security is one that is major, and especially talking about sort of relating to one of the unfortunate trends that is happening, which is fascism, and also the decline of democracy. I know, like the Freedom of the World, which is a report that comes out once a year. Also recently, sort of talks about that, also numbers. So like covering sort of the events of 2020, that was marking the 15th consecutive year of sort of decline in global freedom. And they're kind of measuring, I believe, is around 195 countries. And sort of by that report, 73 experienced decline, where only 28 made gains, sort of measuring the democracy and the freedom. And so, in the conclusion, that means that basically around 54% are living in so-called not free countries,
Mhm.
which currently is accounting for that only 38% of the world population kind of like is living in that state. So that is the highest since the decline began, which is pretty considerable. Looking at the trends and what is happening.
Sure. Yeah. I'm curious. I know very little about Denmark, but is that threat of fascism and like the decline of freedom, is that happening there in an immediate local sense, or is it more like a global concern, or is it like this is not really going to hurt us, but it's troubling anyway? Like what is the normal feeling towards it?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, because I think a lot of things can also be subjective, right? Like kind of, but I think that sort of in general, kind of when we talk about information flows um, and sort of also polarization, I think that is definitely something that is also playing a role in Denmark, and also the same report as mentioned before showed also how sort of after the COVID-19 pandemic. Sort of there was like an increase in sort of the democratic decline, and I think that is also definitely related to what's happening in Denmark. So I would say Denmark is still, like, I think, one of the most free countries in the world. But I think in terms of both now, like we have just adjusted the terror threat level, and I think every time there's a threat from the outside, people start focusing more on kind of what is protecting their own, um, rather than opening up and sort of looking more sort of at the person next to them. So I think it's definitely some of the trends is also visualized and present in Denmark. Maybe not as much as in other countries, but definitely it's present in some way.
Sure. And even here where it's like very immediate, like we're literally losing our rights every week. The I don't know. I know in the circles that I walk in, it's like known and accepted, like this is what's happening and that's a
Mm.
problem. But as far as like the wider public, or like what, like like I, on social media I follow the kind of people who agree with me. That's like
Mm.
the isolation, like the silo effect, the echo chamber. So to me it's like, oh yeah, everybody's hip to what's happening, but I know like statistically there's a whole half of the country that wants like things to get, in my opinion, much worse, and thinks that like I don't know, the very things that could make us more free are the things that are going to end freedom. And then there's another half of the country that seems sympathetic, but a lot of them might really just not have the time or want to bother, or just like, I don't know, like we've had some smoke from the wildfires in Canada here all summer long, like from New York down to where I am in North Carolina, like all the way. And that's like a little apocalyptic to me. And yet it still feels like business as usual in a lot of
Mm.
ways. And I guess that's what, like, part of what we're doing is, like, I think for a lot of people, it's just hard to imagine what to do about it. And everybody's so stressed about just keeping a roof over their heads and food on their plates that they're like not, they can't take the time to imagine. But if you can really, and social media is not helping them imagine, it's just showing them the problems again and again for the most part. And sometimes an inspirational solution, but usually just horror and outrage. But if you can show them a platform that's like, hey, here's people who are working on solutions and here's an invitation to join them, and like this is exactly how it can happen, I think people would be into that.
Mm.
So yeah.
Definitely, definitely, and I think that that relates also to, one thing about sort of the like democracy and also coming from the top down, whether that's like authoritarian regimes, but also like you have this field talking about the platforms also, that not quite frankly they're not maybe, they're not really inspiring hope, because and maybe that's also one of the things we'll get into, but how they're built up with the current sort of social media platforms, because the way we're built and wired as human people is, we tend to respond to things that creates emotion in us, right? And so what creates emotion the most is fear, hate, and so that's also why this, when you also talk about what's the status in Denmark, it's not that we have authoritarian dictators, but we have social media, which is super present, not in Denmark, but also, of course, many else. And that, I think, relates to the radicalization and sort of misinformation, which is also part of driving sort of this distortion in democracy. There was also a study that where 330,000 videos on YouTube was analyzed, and sort of out of those videos, there was, I believe, around 72 million comments that was kind of like gone through systematically between May and July last year, and more than 26% of people who commented on what they sort of call alt-right, so relating to sort of the alt-right movement, when they started watching that, they tended to drift over to alt-right videos,
Yeah.
and sort of also subsequently comment on that. So this kind of like radicalization that happens, unfortunately, more on the towards the negative side, rather than creating a positive spiral towards hope and what you can do as a person in your local community. It's it's things that kind of spiral pretty fast down. And that's again coming back to seeing not these companies. I honestly don't see Mark Zuckerberg or the people as evil, waking up and like, oh, how can I create doomsday? But it's they're bound to like business model that prioritize profit above anything else. And so when that's the case, the algorithm is what's supporting that. But this is one of the examples of that.
Yeah, we've seen how profit is such a corrosive motive in healthcare and in housing and in education. It wrecks everything almost. I think like it's fine to like build or make something and say I want this much money for it. Like I think that level of capitalism is acceptable. But when you take basic needs and commodify them and then like try to squeeze as much money out of them as
Yeah.
possible, and now we have that with information, with the internet, and with people's with data about people and these psychological profiles, it's just become so insidious. I remember when I was first hearing the crazy conspiracies, like there are plenty of conspiracies that I take seriously, but there's a lot more that I think are like total nonsense. Like the
Mhm.
QAnon stuff is wildly, it's just so wild. Um, but I remember I was like starting to look into some criticism of the government or something that seemed reasonable. And then like click on one more article and suddenly things are getting like a little weird and extreme. And then one more article and I'm reading an article about how the Jews control the weather
Yep.
and how like yeah, like we need Fuhrer Trump to like save us from the depraved. It's just like the pedophile that and then the and like the adrenochrome, like the Pizzagate, like the
Yeah.
little pedophiles that it's
Yeah.
like there is a genuine pedophile ring in America, like a multinational pedophile ring, and we are like pulling on those threads with Jeffrey Epstein and that documentary that came out. Like so much was about to be exposed. Donald Trump and Bill Clinton are both connected to this guy,
Mm.
and then suddenly this huge crazy conspiracy about like Satanists, Hollywood people like kidnapping children and torturing them for their adrenaline and using it as a drug makes the whole thing sound so crazy. And now we're not hunting down the real pedophile ring anymore. And
Yeah,
if you start talking about it, you can very easily sound like these total wahoos who like show up at the pizza place with a gun because they heard there's kids locked in the basement.
shooting.
And um
Yeah.
yeah, it's
And I think like there's also, I mean, there's unfortunately a lot of examples of that, you know. And I think the one of the really unfortunate part, which is, you know, when it comes to the whole, when you have a sort of profit machine and a profit maximizing machine like, you know, Facebook and Instagram and other social media platforms, and sort of the regulation or kind of making sure that, you know, hate speech and other stuff, misinformation is kept to minimum. You know, there was it's the woman, Frances Haugen, that was one of the whistleblowers from Facebook,
right.
who kind of like, you know, revealed some of the what's called like also known as the Facebook papers. Who said that like that 80% of the spending on sort of combating misinformation is spent on English content, um, while sort of only 9% of users are English speakers, and that's, you know, and I think even like I have, you know, it's only by working with Actor where I, you know, of course, I'm listening to a lot of podcasts, you know, researching a lot, that I kind of find out some of these things, and also, you know, understanding that suddenly, okay, you know, some of these technical like platforms, are actually looking way more different in global South than global North. There was also there's been a lot of studies that's been made, you know, that some of the most trending top 10 trending posts, you know, in some of the countries are really vile, you know, videos of people beating, you know, inciting to, genocide, and sort of racism. And there was also a reporter, I know that Amnesty made also like one of the articles referring to a reporter that created an account, and sort of on this account, just, you know, again, as you talked about before, like clicking on, you know, recommended videos, and really kind of seeing how they just kind of like spiraled, you know, out into more and more, really bad stuff, and seeing kind of like, I think even like the quote was, you know, after I looked in this feed, I saw more dead people than I've seen, you know, in my entire life. I saw that in 3 weeks, right? And that's, I think it's important to talk about this because it's again, you know, is this that is so embodied and embedded into, you know, society we live in today is these platforms, and of course, if we don't talk about that, not about the problem, but also about the solution, which I also hope we can get into in this podcast, and not only,
Sure,
you
of
know,
course.
painting doomsday, but it is important, I think, especially for people who are not aware of these things, to really look up and engage in, because it's not something that, is being talked as much about as it actually should be, because it's so important to our infrastructure today and society.
Yeah. And to go on with the doom and gloom for just a little bit longer, and then we can switch gears and talk about the great solutions we have. You bring up like the difference between how it operates in the global South versus the global North, which we had never talked about on the show. But I mean, it's a really great point because we know about like the Rohingya genocide. I know there was something in Southeast Asia where another genocide was fueled by Facebook and the algorithms. And it's, as you said, as we've talked about before, there's this enrage to engage philosophy that like brings out the worst in human nature and pours gas on the fire of hatred because that's what sells and like keeps people hooked. And it also just happens to make dictators and corporate oligarchies rich because they all benefit from social instability. So it's a really sweet pot for people in power. Um, but I think the way you bring it up, like how you're saying that Facebook, most of its regulation is English language. Like these companies will only ever do as much as they need to look like they're doing enough, but it'll never be enough because their motivation is not truly security or truth or anything like that. Their motivation is just money.
Yeah,
So they want to spend as little money on that department as possible.
yeah.
So it's only if the people in these countries where these corporations exist, like Meta, um, can find some way to regulate and restrain them, will we be able to even spare the people in the global South? Like in some countries, the only way people access the internet is through Facebook and WhatsApp. They don't have web browsers.
It's
They just
equal
everything
to the
is
internet.
What?
Yeah, it's equal to like Facebook is literally
Yes.
the internet. Yeah.
Yes, that's what they use. Yeah, that they don't go on Firefox or Chrome.
Mhm.
They just go on Facebook. And that, imagine how awful, like, for so many reasons. That's like taking something that was so wonderful, the internet, and just turning it into this cancer that's everywhere, that everyone
Mhm.
starts to rely on. And so we can do better.
We can do, and
Yeah.
we should do better. And I think, relating to, because I think it'll be, I think you also connected with some of the actors that is working in the Philippines. Would be great to have on the show as well, because for me it's like, reading and listening, watching these things, but also to be, great to have someone maybe on the show who's in the midst of this, on the ground in some of these areas. So anyway, I'll just as a side note, I would be happy to connect with some of those. Um,
Yeah, that'd be great.
so maybe, because we haven't really got into what actor actually is. I think we just spoke
Yeah.
about some of the background. We just skipped that part. So um, 10 minutes in, 25 minutes into the show, talk about what actor actually is. Um, so actor's been kind of on a 4 year journey, where again the first 1.5 year was about trying to understand the problem that we want to solve in the first place before we start solving it. And lucky enough, I've been having sort of the fortunate ability to attend what's called the Chaos Pilot School in Denmark. So for those who don't know that, really encouraged to look it up. It's a kind of a 3 year program, kind of a bachelor in sort of systems change, and where a whole big part of the semester was just asking questions. So I learned a lot from that. But anyways, so really focusing on trying to understand the problem we want to solve. And then we were sort of fortunate enough to get some funding along the way. We can get back to kind of like the journey itself. But what we end up sort of like landing on, what is that we want to build, is really a tool that can amplify the power of civil society. So really focusing on civil society organization. Again, not believing that those in power are, necessarily evil by heart, but seeing that those that are in power, both sitting within the politician, within sort of the business sector and others, are those who are benefiting mostly from how the system is rigged at the moment. So in order to really, push for the changes, relating to both the climate crisis, and human rights, it very much needs and also is coming from the civil society, from the bottom up. But we need to be even more and better organized. And there's a quote that I always can't remember exactly, but it's something in the lines of that the few that organizes the few that organize well always win over the masses that organize poorly, something on the lines of that. And I think for us, it's really, understanding that we are not the star of the show here. Actors is not, at the center. We are here to support the people that are doing all this amazing work, but also recognizing that the current tools are just not able to support the organizing capacity that's needed. So what actor is really, thinking of something like Signal, which is a great encrypted messaging tool. But as soon as you talk about having a movement of a few hundred people or even less, things quickly kind of scale. Gets difficult to organize, because it's all happening through chat and through chat groups. So what we're building is kind of almost, you can say, Signal, but with more organizing capacity. So the ability to create communities where you can create events, you can share events across spaces, you can connect and interconnect groups in new ways. So it's easier for a chapter, let's say Extinction Rebellion chapter, to work together with a Fridays for Future chapter in Europe. And so both sort of the organized capacity, delegate task, but also really trying to understand how can we much better separate conversations from kind of like important updates. So that's something that a lot of people can relate to when they're part of, like, let's say WhatsApp group, where they look away from their phone for 3 minutes and they have like 12 notifications, and 9 of those are just like a conversation between Joe and Dan. That's just chit chat, but like one of them is a really, really important update that say, hey, now on Saturday we're all going to meet to talk about XYZ. And so that's something we've been working a lot with through also what we call updates. And of course, all of this based on sort of like encryption and high security. So we're using the Matrix protocol that we're building on. That is this open, standardized protocol without getting too technical. That also enables sort of interoperability. And for those who are not sort of familiar with that phrase in this setting, interoperability means that you essentially can bridge across already existing tools, so that people don't have to be an actor. People can actually read, reply, comment from. I believe there's bridges now to 20 tools, so Discord, Slack, Telegram, Signal, and so on. So they don't have to be an actor first. Right now, there's a trade-off because it's not fully intent encrypted, but actually regulation just made it that within the next 2 years, you have to be able to have intent encryption across these chat tools. So that's also one of the areas that we're working to not only just provide a new tool that is about, okay, now come over to this camp and start a new silo, but also how can we connect what is already there. So to summarize, it is a tool that we want groups, communities, movements to use to organize both really well internally, but also at the same time connect sort of the vast ecosystem that is working the same challenges, so to say. I hope that shed a bit of light on what we are actually doing and not just the problem we're solving.
Yeah, that does. I think that's perfect. And it's just like, it's really great to see and hear, because that's when I speak to activists here who are trying to organize directly about what's happening, say with like abortions being made illegal. One of the main limitations in organizing around this issue is that the it's been criminalized, and even organizing around it in some cases in states have been criminalized, and we've already seen like Meta give over information to police investigations about people who traveled across state lines to have abortions. So the need for end-to-end encryption and a trusted platform is imperative and really like crucial just to get started. And like you said, Signal and Telegram are great, but when you want to scale those up, it just breaks down. And also there's such a value to having what Actor is offering, which is the different groups that you can see and that can see each other, because then you can start to pool resources and share support, because a lot of the same people who will care about an environmental issue that's impacting the area are also going to want to help make sure folks can get abortions if they need it, and they're also going to want to make sure that queer people feel safe.
Yeah.
But maybe one issue is more important to them, and that's the one that they stay most up to date on. But still, like if there's a crisis, folks want to know. That's what I'm finding as things get arguably worse around here. We just this morning got bad news from the state legislature, passed three bills that the governor tried to veto, but because the Republicans have a supermajority, they overrode the veto. And the bills basically ban gender affirming care for minors. They it's don't say gay in schools now, so you just can't talk about your sexuality or gender. I wouldn't even be able to talk about my partner if I were a teacher. And it's that, but it's all now, it's law, it's here, like and I don't know who knows about it. I know about it, but there's going to be a lot of people who I'll talk to next week and the week after who will still be hearing about it for the first time.
Yeah.
And to not have like a good way of disseminating that information besides social media, which they're more likely to hear about, like the Maui wildfires, which are horrible and everybody should know about it. But the fact that a lot of people will hear about that before they hear about legislation that they can do something about in their own state, or like some direct action that they could do in their own town or community, that's a problem, because it's like it adds to the feeling of helplessness, because you're hearing about crises with no sense of place or sense of empowerment.
Definitely. And I think what you're talking about, I mean, I was definitely aware of that, what you just shared. And so I think that's definitely one of the problems, is just becoming aware of it. But I think even becoming aware of it is not, like always either, enough. I think that's also why we have, the terms that have come to surface, like selectivism and collectivism, which is, doing sort of the minimum or changing your profile picture. I'm not saying that that you shouldn't change your profile picture, that that shows empathy for a cause. But the problem is that when you do that, and then you think, okay, now I've done my part, and now I'm all good. And I think that is one place, because social media has, to in some larger case, like the Black Lives Matter movement, other like being able to shine light on really important causes. But these kind of like public squares, as you also can call them, also act in some way as a bullhorn, where like they're really great at sort of like bringing the attention, at least for a certain while, until you scroll to the next item, but bringing attention to a cause. But like, what happens when you then you hear about it and then want to do something? That's where like the organizing capacity is really not present. And that's where like, so a lot of stuff, you need to have a smaller space, or at least spaces that can have that ability to actually go from having the awareness to taking action. So it does become, oh yeah, I know about this course, but yeah, what should I do? And then you scroll on to the funny cat that can eat popcorn and drink wine at the same time, whatever.
Right. Yeah, sure. Um, we just recorded an episode with my friend Fell, who's the director of development at the Asheville Racial Justice Coalition, and we were talking about specifically how when George Floyd was murdered, and then that summer of 2020, the Black Lives Matter protest really swept the nation, and it was beautiful, and it really put this issue of police brutality on the radar for a whole new sphere of people, which was great. But we were saying how like there hasn't really been that much serious reform since then, and the problem persists. Every week we're hearing about someone else who was killed by the police. And what we really need is like social media helped with getting that awareness out, and it gave us like clicktivism. It gave us ways to show support virtually, but it never trickled down to like the concrete local transformational change that people could actually make. But I think people are looking for that now. I think people are kind of worn out on just the bad news train, and they want to do something about it. So creating a platform that's actually an invitation to action, instead of just like a bombardment of here's all the wild crap in the world and cute cat videos to then make you feel better. This is like, here's something that's going on where you live, and here's the main people who are doing something about it, and here's how they want your help. And in particular, we want to help RJC with that, because they're doing really great work in Asheville around reparations, like because Asheville city promised reparations when all this went down, which was a really great promise, and they pledged a certain amount of money, but they have yet to really start giving that money out and deciding how to use it. So RJC is really like holding their fat to the fire, making sure that happens, and proposing concrete initiatives for like, this is what that money could go towards.
And yeah, I mean, I think you touch upon like a subject that I think is just as much of a question and not really, an answer, because I think the answer is really, there can be many answers if there are. And I think that is, with these tools, and hopefully, what we aim for is like an easy, like both an easier but also more engaging way to actually take action in your local neighborhood. But I think we also acknowledge that what we are doing is also directly competing within sort of what is also coined the attention economy, right? And I think the attention economy is really looking at that your attention in some way is finite. You don't have like endless amount of attention. And also the Center for Humane Technology, which is amazing, also nonprofit, and highly recommendable. They also have an amazing podcast. Is kind of in one of the episodes talking about is the same way that you can look at a tree and see, okay, what is the value of a tree? And right now we kind of like value the tree when it's cut down and put into firewood. But you can also put another value, which is what is the value for creating a place for ants to feed, to provide shade for animals, and all other aspects. And in the same way, when we are waking up in the morning, most of us, unfortunately, at this point, like, I just, one of the first things, look at our phone, and already then, like, our attention is kind of like started to be used. And so the thing is, we're both competing with attention, but also we are competing with the content. So if you are like a teenager or a young person who maybe still learning where your limbs are, like, would you rather be like within a conversation on Actor that's about maybe talking about some really difficult, challenging stuff and organizing a campaign, or that morning when you wake up and you're a bit, maybe feeling a bit sorry for yourself, do you more just want to look at funny, memes and funny stuff that makes you laugh, or and I think how do we sort of both build something that kind of can foster engagement, but also is that enough essentially to then make people engage, or is there also other aspects? Is there more regulation that minimizes the screen use and screen time for just some of these consumption-based endless doom scroll, so people have the attention to actually engage in things that can make the world a better place? And I think it's one of the questions that's going to be really interesting to explore within the next 10 years, as we have more content than ever being produced, especially now also AI that can produce even faster content and even more curated content. What is the role kind of being engaged in a community, and especially when you suddenly no longer can swipe to the right if you don't like the person in front of you, and physically, but have to deal with, Jared, I think you're nice, but you also have these things that I don't like about you, like. So I think that's going to be really interesting, something we think about also, in our process to provide something that can help out with this.
Yeah, man, there's so much there to what you just said. Like, I personally, philosophically, would describe myself as an anarchist, but at the same time, I think like things have gotten so out of control, and humans are just so not equipped to deal with social media and
Mm.
resist like the effects it has on our brain. Like you say, we wake up, we look at the phone, and it's like so much conditioning goes into this. I went to school for psychology, and it's just very like obvious how they're using the paired stimuli responses with the notifications and random intervals to make like the conditioning super effective. And it's so insidious, and people think that they're above it, but
Mm.
very few are actually above it. And then so much of our modern tools that we need to like just to park your car even are like all in the phone, and that it's just like this money making machine that we all carry around. And then what you said about the content, the endless production of content, it's like just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mm.
Like we can all make a million videos about whatever we care about, and they'll sit on the internet in unwatched corners forever. But in the first place, like that data does have a real world cost. Like cooling all these data centers is an enormous energy expenditure that does contribute to climate change. And like no one's talking about that. They're just building more data centers. Like
Mm.
Walmart and Amazon are the biggest data center owners in America, I think. We'll fact check that one. But they know that like data itself is a commodity now that can make them money. And it's such an easy thing because like before there were TV stations and they would have to like sell commercial space, and then the people who are marketing would have to make the commercials and film the commercials, and that would cost them tons of money. Now with social media, like we are their commercial. You get an influencer to hold your product up. These corporations never had to spend a dime on actually marketing their product. We're all doing it for them. And we're also like we are the TV. They also used to have to produce the TV shows that would actually bring the people to the channel so they could see the commercials. But now we're the TV show too. We and all of our friends like are producing our own TV shows that other people are making money off of, and it's resulting in this endless avalanche of crappy content and misinformation and divisiveness. It's just a mess. Um, so yeah, regulation might be in order. I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
is a long way of saying that.
Yeah, and I think I hope that there's that resistance, and the resistance continue to also build up. As I talk about resistance towards, like, letting, big tech just kind of shape our society, because also when Qualtrics, they made like also survey at some point where they ask, millennials and also boomers, to kind of like compare these two segments to each other because different generations, if technology has made relationship better. And
Mm.
Millennials actually 52% said yes, while the majority, 57% of boomers said no. And this could be many reasons, like they just didn't learn how to use it, but it could also be that like the younger generation or the newer generation, they're just accustomed that is what relationship is. It is maybe without, maybe I'm sticking my neck out for this, but like that the relationship are a bit more superficial in terms of, yeah, of course you can have tough conversation online, but still like there's something when you're meeting one-on-one with person or with people that that is still different and has still something extra to it than kind of like only having your friends online at the same time. So I hope that that we will have in some way, if it's come from government, or other way to regulate, sort of these big players that, has, I would say, have such a grab of the society today. So I think I'm pretty much with you on that one.
Yeah, sure. I feel what you're saying about the social interactions, because I've noticed I feel like this is also maybe an American culture thing or a white culture thing in general, but people they don't like to tell you no, or tell you they disagree, or like you said, like air a grievance with you. Like that's very taboo in a lot of social circles. And then you get on the internet, and like all people want to do is tell you why you're an idiot, and like that you're so wrong, and just be like totally aggressive.
Yeah,
And I think it is so valuable to be able to sit with somebody and disagree and like understand their perspective. That's why things are getting so polarized, is because we see these, like, so many people think, oh, if they're a Trump voter, they must be a total idiot. And that's usually not the case. They've just been deceived. And the only way you're going to see how they've been deceived is if you talk to them. And you might find the ways that you've been deceived too. Um, but if we avoid all of the the hard conversations, because we're so used to the ease of just being around people that agree with us, or being able to yell at people from our own room and then turn off the screen, then yeah, it's a problem. So
definitely. And I think like coming, also talking about sort of where should the I was going to call it the resistance, but like
yeah, I like it. The
yeah, the
resistance.
resistance,
Yeah.
yeah, but towards sort of like, I think for me, one of the sort of the beginning feelings that I had when also starting actor, was being part of starting actor, was really, I didn't care so much that actor was solving the problem, or that it was important that we should be on top of the world. The most importantly, that someone or something is pushing against what is kind of like happening, and what we're talking about sort of all these the current problems with big tech and social media platforms. So for me, it was kind of like, it's important that we dare to dream big, which now it seems, because building something that is challenging, some of these major platforms, major players, requires a lot of resource, and it requires, that we can in some way come together, because they've had a lot of time, they have a lot of, a huge machine behind developing, and I think we've also seen, our fair share of like many great initiatives, and open source projects that has amazing vision and amazing, um, you know uh, maybe also team behind it, but just still like there's something that lacks. And so one of the approaches that we have taken in the beginning was really trying to build a coalition around the project. So going literally around knocking on doors, um, to different NGOs, Amnesty and Greenpeace, ActionAid, Civicus, and other in the space, both, and also small grassroots, to make sure that it's not only big players within the NGO sector, and really saying, hey, like, if you agree to this problem statement of civil society pushing for changes but lacking essentially the right tools to do so, do you want to be part of joining this coalition, and we build this together? And what we kind of like found out by having this conversation is that a lot of them actually had tried to build tool either for themselves or for the ecosystem they're supporting, but failed, because a lot of these NGOs, their primary focus is not to develop, like be app developers. So they got either a company to develop for them, which then ended up not being secure enough, plus it had a huge cost, they could not maintain it. And so that's why, like, when we kind of came together and we actually literally put them in some of the same room, with these different representatives, they were kind of like keen on it. So that's something for us been really exciting to say to expand this ecosystem that now also the Beacon Network is a part of. Like, hey, let's build this together instead of just being all these small silos trying to solve the problem in different ways. So I hope that we can kind of continue to sort of expand like that coalition. And just the last note on that is actually quite recently, just a little less than a year ago, we actually merged with before they were called Effectio. And just to be clear, like, I don't have any technical background whatsoever. So to build something that needs to have super high security, to be able to support activists in global south extreme situation, I in some way are the least knowledgeable or to actually build this. So our challenge for the first 3 years was really, how do we build the things that we want? And by coincidence of fate, I was maybe I could briefly share. You can always see it's relevant for listeners, but I had found out about the Matrix protocol, and kind of realizing that the Matrix protocol build, which allows for encryption, it was non-profit. It made so much sense for us to make a partnership with Matrix, because if you can talk about, if we're building a car, they build a lot of the engine, to use that analogy. And so I wrote Matthew, the CEO and founder and co-founder of Matrix, and say, hey, we should build a partnership. And if you don't reply, I'm going to jump on a plane and come over to see you. And he's based in London, or they're based in London. And he wrote, this is August last year, I think. And he wrote back to me and said, Emil, no, don't worry. We have the internet. You don't need to jump on a plane. Anyways, the conversation kind of faded out, and nothing really happened. And at that point, my wife Matilda had been asking me for a long time, hey, Emil, let's go on this trip through Europe in a van. You can work remote. And finally, I kind of gave in. I was like, okay, it doesn't matter anyway. Like, we were running out of money. The team had kind of like, it was just me and one of the designers left, Mirek. And so I went on this trip, and suddenly I came to think about, there was this Matrix. And I looked through my emails, and I saw the last message I sent, which was, I will come visit you if you don't reply. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I will do it. And I asked Matilda to be with our little son for 3 days, and I booked a flight ticket to London, landed in London at 4 p.m., and took out to the head office, which is a very secure building. You have to get access through lots of doors. NATO is using the tool, the German government, so they're really, really secure. And I ring the doorbell, and the secretary is like, hello, who is it? And I was like, it's Emil. Who are you here to see? And I say, I'm here to see Matthew. And the 2 seconds of pause, and she's like, okay, great, I'm gonna come and let you in. And she comes down the stairs, she opened the door, it's like, wow, thank you, it's amazing. Without having an appointment, and let me up into the waiting room. And Matthew, he's a pretty tall guy, comes out with the phone in his hand and looks at me and his calendar, and he asked me, like, do we know each other? And I just say, like, yes and no. I sent you this email 3 months ago. And out of my sort of the corner of my eye, I see the secretary, like, oh my god, like, realizing she let in the wrong person. And they are right in the middle of like a super important board meeting, raising the Series B round, whatever, for a couple £100 million. And she thought I was one of these people, really important people. Well, I was just, a matter of fact, like this random guy showing up from Portugal. And long story short, like, he let me stay and has a meeting with me. Very, very nice of if he's going to listen to the podcast. Thank you, Matthew. And although the meeting doesn't go quite as expected, he ends up saying, but have you heard about these guys called Effectio, which is developing something very similar? And I went to the website straight away. I read the white paper, which I could have written, swear to God. And I jump on a call with Ben, which is the CTO and also co-founder of Effectio. And we just kind of hit off straight away, and I fly back, and they're based in Lisbon, 3 hours from where we are in Portugal, and I drive to Lisbon, and we merge together, seeing, okay, we really want to do the same thing here. And they basically have everything we never had. Like, they have an amazing tech team, and we have a lot of the partnerships, the community building, the research, but never had the tech. So we just merge, and that was in January, and really enabled us to raise a good portion of funding and to where we are today. So it was fate and fortune that brought us together. But just to say, that we've been trying to keep an eye out on who else is doing this to make sure that we don't do it in a silo, and that was beautiful example for us. How 1+1 suddenly became 3.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say fate and fortune, and also a lot of determination on your part to just show up. I really appreciate, as someone who's been trying to do this now for a few years, that you need to just like sometimes just push your way in and insist like this is important. You need to know about it. Like what can we do?
Yes.
I'm so glad you did it, because I was in a similar situation. I had this idea like years ago, but I was like, I don't know how to make this, and I don't want to, and it's like way beyond me. So I'm sure someone else will figure it out. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and it never came. Social media just got worse and worse. So then I'm like, I just need to make a nonprofit, and I'll either learn the programming myself and make like a pilot app, or I'll try to raise money and pay the programmers. And then when we find you guys are like just on the cusp of completing the very features that we've been looking for. And like you said, like you could have written the white pages. Like when you guys gave your presentation, I was just like, oh man, this could have been a presentation that we'd be giving somebody about why we need this.
Yes.
It's an incredible thing. And it's allowed us to take our focus totally off of the development and put it on how do we bring people onto this platform, and how do we like create a network which goes beyond just the platform, but is like a network of people who are engaged and who are looking for ways to get involved, and who know what's happening in their world, so they're informed. So you've sped us ahead years in development, and it's just exciting to just hear how ready you are to work with others, and how thoroughly you've considered the problem. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's going to be really one of the core things is doing this together. I think that's how we can. I almost want to say beat them, but like I don't want to like pull fuel in the fire, because like everything has a role. But yeah, I think so excited to have Beacon Network as a part of the project, and you definitely been putting a lot of thoughts into this. So really excited to see what's going to come up in the next even just a couple of months, as so many stuff is happening on both sides.
me as well. Yeah, so much is becoming possible just because of the end-to-end encryption that you guys are offering, and where we're at. So, and maybe we will beat them, or maybe we will just like empower a bunch of smaller communities to do a lot better than they would have without us. And either way, we'll have succeeded. And maybe we'll just do a really good job, and eventually they'll destroy themselves, and we'll be there.
I mean, I think that connects to the Buckminster Fuller quote. Maybe you remember better than me, but something like you cannot remove something, but the only way I think to remove something is to build something that can replace the old, right? Something on the lines of that. Quotation a little bit my side, but I think that is what we're trying to do. Not only stand on the side and shout at it, but like just build something that actually makes the old obsolete. So
yeah, or relegates it to its proper domain, which is television. And then people can know that, okay, I'm going to watch TV, and not pretend that they're social networking.
Yep.
So, well, this has been really great speaking to you, and very exciting just to talk about all this and see what might be ahead. So thank you so much for coming on.
Same to you, Jared. It's been a pleasure, and I think there's a lot of these things we could talk about in 4 episodes easily. A lot of these challenges and also solutions. So thank you for having us here, and also thank you so much for believing the project we're doing. And looking so much forward.
Yeah, well, this will definitely not be the last conversation. So, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you again so much, Emil, and thank you to all your team at Actor. And we look forward to more soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
That's all for now, folks. If you have any questions, comments, kudos, or concerns about this episode, we would love to hear from you. Get in touch with our team directly by emailing connect@thebeaconnetwork.org. Start using Beacon today. Join the network now at www.thebeaconnetwork.org. Want to learn more and stay connected? Find us on Instagram @thebeaconnetwork, facebook.com/thebeaconnetwork, and twitter.com beacon. But our favorite place to connect with you is on Beacon itself, so head to our website and join the conversation today. What are you waiting for? Beacon is a nonprofit. The app is free, we don't sell ads, we don't use algorithms, and we don't monetize human attention and connection. Instead, we ask everyone who can to contribute just a little each month so that Beacon can continue to develop and grow. If everyone gives a little, we will accomplish a lot. So consider giving just $5 or $10 a month to Beacon today. Make a one-time or recurring donation now at www.thebeaconnetwork.org/give. Thanks for tuning in to It's Time We Talked. Find a connection, pass it on.